The General Staff confirmed the successful night strike on the arsenal near Kotluban in Volgograd region. In the evening, a message appeared on Facebook that the Russian occupiers' rocket and artillery weapons were being stored and modernized there. According to available information, an echelon of Iranian missiles arrived at the arsenal on the eve of the strike. Ukrainian drones overcome dense air defense and electronic warfare cover. In fact, we saw the vivid consequences in the morning on numerous videos posted by local residents. Ammunition is still burning and exploding on the territory. The operation was conducted by unmanned systems forces in cooperation with units of the Special Operations Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, the Defense Intelligence of Ukraine, the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. The so-called nuclear rhetoric has attracted my attention, that the Kremlin is spreading through its mouthpieces. We hear these threats from the head of the Russian Federation himself. The most recent example is a statement by Minister Lavrov just now. We can hear it. The goal of inflicting a strategic defeat on Russia has been announced. Almost as planned by London and Washington in May 1945, before the end of the Second World War, developing an operation called Unthinkable to destroy the Soviet Union. At the time, it was kept in the strictest confidence, and today's Anglo-Saxon strategists do not hide their plans. True, they are still hoping to defeat Russia with the hands of the illegitimate neo-Nazi Kiev regime, but they are already preparing Europe to rush into a suicidal adventure. I won't talk here about the ridiculousness and danger of the idea of trying to fight to victory with a nuclear power like Russia. But it seems that civilized countries are realizing that this is an outright bluff, and there are fewer and fewer reasons to follow the whims of a psychopath armed with a nuclear missile. For example, here's an article in the German edition by Konrad Schuller. He called it Putin's Nuclear Tricks. This was a reaction to Putin's latest statement about the West's nuclear destruction if he, that is, the West, does not stop interfering in his bloody affairs in Ukraine. The State Duma chairman supported Putin, saying that a Russian nuclear missile would take only 3 minutes and 20 seconds to reach Europe. But it turns out that Putin's scary statements were made regularly during the decades of his rule in Muscovy. In 2007, for example, Russia threatened Poland with nuclear strikes if it deployed a U.S. missile defense system. And in 2022, when Putin launched his attack on Ukraine, he threatened any potential enemy with consequences they had never experienced in history. However, this has always been an empty statement, because not only does Putin have nuclear weapons, but so does NATO. The author of the article rightly writes that Putin is a murderer, but he is not known to be suicidal. And Western intelligence services are well aware of the strategy of a madman, a weapon of hybrid warfare that makes the enemy believe that you are so insane that he is ready to turn his world into ashes if necessary. Another such weapon is the story of inevitable victory. Russia seems to be huge, say the Kremlin leaders and their henchmen. Its tank production is immense, so Ukraine can only lose. Anyone in Germany or America who suddenly thinks this is true will say to themselves, well, if that's true, then every euro or dollar for Ukraine is wasted money. And now we see exactly the same narratives being voiced in Western countries, and we hear similar things even from the territory of our reliable partners. There's nothing to be done. Muscovite propaganda easily crosses borders. The dual strategy is that this propaganda and scaremongering finds those who will spread and multiply it. Konrad Schuler calls Olaf Scholz intermediary for Putin's nuclear firecrackers. And Donald Trump's formula that the West is stuck in Ukraine, yes it is, so it has to get out, represents a narrative of hopelessness. However, this is not true, and you and I are direct witnesses to this. Despite the terrible losses, Russia captured less territory over the past summer than Ukraine did in a few days during its offensive on the Kursk region. And this Ukrainian offensive did not provoke any global escalation. All we heard was that the Russian Federation had changed its strategy or changed the conditions under which it could use nuclear weapons. However, the Ukrainian army's Kursk offensive and strikes on over-the-horizon radar installations, which are part of the early warning system of the Russian nuclear shield, only resulted in more threats and provoked Putin to go to Mongolia to visit shamans. Putin has nothing to lose. Ukrainian shamans and witches have come to an understanding. What kind of shaman would help a person who destroys nature and holy places? Although Putin has one shaman left, and he is a singer of dubious quality, let's return to Konrad Schuler's conclusions. He argues, and I'm willing to agree, that the alliance against Putin is weak, not because it cannot do anything against his power, but because governments in America and Germany do not want to burden their voters with the costs of effective defense against threats, and because they believe they can gain political advantage in their countries by playing on voters' fears that the same Russian propagandists instilled in them, instead of coldly exposing Putin's nuclear manipulations. Now I would like to bring Mykola Malamush, the Army General, to our conversation. Mr. Mykola, I am pleased to welcome you this evening. Glory to Ukraine. Congratulations to the heroes. Glory. I'm glad to see it. I'd like to talk to you about, and your opinion is important to me as a person who has been deeply immersed in the secrets of intelligence, but I also want to talk about the current situation. We have an extremely difficult situation in Vuhledar. The enemy has taken it almost in a pincer grip, despite the fact that the city is located at a dominant height and it is not difficult to defend. At least that's what the military said. There are a lot of concrete fortifications there relative to other positions, and it's really not difficult to defend. But the enemy is advancing, albeit at the cost of heavy losses. Our fortifications are hit with KBs, and then infantry on armor without armored vehicles, accompanied by drones, is sent in, and this is the first component. And the second is that our allies also send us guided bombs, the same JSOWs. Is it possible to strike at our flanks and break those pincers before the enemy burrows into the ground, and thus help our fighters unblock the city? First of all, we are talking about the kind of operation they were planning near Pokrovsk, which is strikes on the flank and accordingly strikes on the front lines. So we conducted a number of special operations. We counterattacked. There were also attacks on the enemy's flanks, and of course, having destroyed the enemy's huge resources, he was forced to stop or weaken his attacks, so he moved south, in particular to Vuhledar.
Панівні висоти захищені були і бетонними, і штучно створеними укріпленнями, які вже були в форматі сучасних інженерних споруд. І це дало можливість захищатися не тільки
from the same cabins, respectively, other types of aircraft bombs. So we see that this is an area that can be held for a long time. However, the enemy always adopts tactics, such as encirclement or semi-encirclement, so they really went from the flanks.
Ну і зрозуміло, що в ряді випадків ми довго не проводили такі операції. Ну, наприклад, якщо брати Авдіївку, вони заходили з флангів тилів, наносили удари кабами по місту.
Then we were forced to withdraw. Today, even Syrskyi has new techniques and says that we will act outside the box. These are attacks from the flanks, attacks from the rear, one of the methods to unblock certain of our settlements, including Vuhledar. And so today, along with keeping positions in the city, it is advisable to pull back large forces and destroy the reserves that are going there, and of course, prepare counterattacks. The airborne troops, special operations forces, air assault troops could work powerfully. They have the specifics of not just conducting frontline strikes or standing in defense in the trenches. And they have to perform the functions of counterattacks, strikes from the flanks, for example, at night from the rear. And this can create such a powerful opposition and panic that they will not only not advance there, but also flee. But we have to prepare for this. It is a very difficult operation. Just a breakthrough. As we saw in the Kursk direction, it is a different method, a different model. Basically one where the enemy does not expect when he concentrates on his flank strikes. And we are here in an unexpected sector where one of the pincers, or two from different sides at once, or from the rear, where he moves reserves respectively. Powerful strikes with deep firepower that destroy reserves. Their positions are covered accordingly, and special units that operate accordingly in planned rear areas, supported by drones, supported by other means of both control and fire. This is a class. It should be like this. It is difficult. We agree with many leaders who are there, but this is what the forces that perform such functions are trained for. So I talked to many representatives of special operations forces. They are often used as infantry, which is inappropriate, specifically in Vuhledar, where they should prove to be very effective.